In a 2013 study at Iowa State University, researchers tracked 96 adults and found that most people forget a new name within 4 seconds of hearing it. Not 4 minutes, 4 seconds. If you're over 50 and you've ever shaken a hand, heard "I'm David," and drawn a total blank 3 seconds later, this is not the beginning of dementia. It's a fixable flaw in how your brain files information, and there's a 30-second technique that repairs it almost instantly. Here's what nearly everyone believes. They think forgetting names is a memory storage problem. They assume the name went in, got lost somewhere in the filing cabinet, and can't be found. So they blame their age. They say things like, "I'm just bad with names," or "my memory's going," and they quietly panic, because they've read the headlines about cognitive decline, and they wonder if this is the first crack. But the research points somewhere else entirely. The name was never stored. It never made it into the filing cabinet at all. In a landmark set of experiments by memory researcher Lynn Zechmeister and later expanded work at the University of California, scientists showed that name forgetting isn't a retrieval failure. It's an encoding failure. The information gets dropped at the front door before it's ever written down, and that distinction matters more than almost anything else you'll learn about your own mind. Because a storage problem is frightening and often permanent, while an encoding problem is something you can fix in the next 30 seconds. But the real question is why your brain treats a person's name so differently from everything else about them. And the answer involves a strange quirk that memory scientists have named after a butcher. Think about what happens when you meet someone. Let's say you meet a woman named Rose who's a florist. Notice something. You will almost never forget that she sells flowers. But you'll forget that her name is Rose. That's bizarre when you really sit with it, because Rose is one syllable, and she owns a flower shop downtown and has been doing it for 20 years, is a whole paragraph. Your brain kept the paragraph and threw away the syllable. Why? Psychologists call this the Baker-Baker paradox, and it was demonstrated in controlled experiments in the 1980s. Here's the setup. Researchers showed people a photograph of a man. Half the group was told, "This man's name is Baker." The other half was told, "This man is a baker," the profession. Then later, they were asked to recall it. The people who were told he was a baker by profession remembered it far more often than the people who were told his last name was Baker. Same word, same sound, same number of letters, but one stuck and one vanished. Why? Because when your brain hears Baker, the profession, it lights up a whole neighborhood of connections. You picture flour, you smell warm bread, you see an apron, an oven, a shop at dawn. The word has hooks. It grabs onto things you already know. But when your brain hears Baker as a name, it means nothing. It's an arbitrary sound attached to a stranger's face. There are no hooks, nothing to grab, and so it slides right off, like water off glass. This is the single most important thing to understand about your memory for names. A name, by itself, is meaningless data. Your brain evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to remember things that mattered for survival. Where the water was, which berries were poison, whether that face belonged to friend or enemy. It did not evolve to remember that an arbitrary two-syllable sound corresponds to a particular set of cheekbones. That's a modern demand on an ancient machine. And here's where your age genuinely does play a role, but not the role you fear. As you cross 50, the speed of what scientists call encoding slows down. Not your intelligence, not your wisdom, not your ability to store things long-term. What slows is the split-second window in which new information gets locked in. Researchers at the University of Texas at Dallas, in work led by Denise Park spanning decades, mapped this out precisely. The aging brain is perfectly capable of forming strong new memories. It just needs a moment longer to do it, and a name arrives in that first 2 seconds of a conversation, right when you're distracted by shaking a hand, reading a face, and thinking about what to say next. So picture your brain at the moment of a handshake. You're processing the person's face. You're reading their expression. You're preparing your own greeting. You're managing your own nerves. And in the middle of that traffic jam, a name floats by. A meaningless sound. In the loudest, busiest half-second of the entire interaction. Of course it gets dropped. It's not weakness. It's overload. But this is only half the story. What happens at the neurological level, in the hippocampus, is even more revealing, and it explains why the fix has to happen in the first 30 seconds or not at all. Deep in the center of your brain, curled like a seahorse on each side, sits the hippocampus. This is your memory's recording studio. Nothing becomes a lasting memory without passing through here first. And the hippocampus has a rule that governs everything about how you remember names. It does not record what you merely hear. It records what you pay attention to and connect to something else. Neuroscientists describe memory formation with a phrase you may have heard: neurons that fire together, wire together. It was coined by the Canadian psychologist Donald Hebb back in 1949, and 70 years of research have confirmed it. When two things happen in your brain at the same instant, a face and a name, a sound and a meaning, the connection between those neurons physically strengthens, a new pathway forms. But here's the catch that ruins us with names. If the name never fires at the same time as anything meaningful, no pathway forms at all. The name arrives alone, connects to nothing, and dissolves. Now think about what your body is doing right now when you meet someone new. Your attention is a spotlight, and that spotlight can only shine on one thing at a time. When you're worried about the impression you're making, your spotlight is on yourself, not on their name. In a series of studies on what psychologists call the next-in-line effect, first documented by Malcolm Brenner in 1973, people were placed in a group and asked to each say something out loud. Afterward, they were tested on what the others had said. The finding was consistent and a little uncomfortable. People remembered almost nothing that was said in the moments right before their own turn. Why? Because they were rehearsing what they themselves were about to say. Their spotlight was pointed inward. This is exactly what happens at a party or a meeting. Someone says their name, but you're busy preparing your own name, your own handshake, your own smile. Your spotlight is on you. And so their name is spoken into a room where nobody's listening, not even the part of your own brain that's supposed to catch it. Some scientists dispute how large this effect is in casual settings, but the core mechanism holds up across dozens of experiments. If you've ever been introduced to 3 people in a row at a gathering and realized 10 seconds later you couldn't name a single one of them, this is what was happening inside your skull. It wasn't that your memory failed. It's that the recording studio was never switched on, the microphone was off, nobody hit record. And the more people you meet in quick succession, the worse it gets, because each new face wipes out the fragile trace of the last one before it can harden. There's a reason this hits harder after 50, and it's worth being precise about it, because the myths around this cause real fear. As we age, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that manages attention and juggles several things at once, becomes a bit less efficient at multitasking. That's well documented. So the very situation that demands you split your attention between a face, a name, and your own social performance becomes harder to manage. It's not that your memory got weaker, it's that your attention got more expensive to spend. And names are being charged to an account that's already stretched thin. If this is making sense so far and you want the part that actually fixes it, the specific technique and the exact 30-second window it lives in, subscribe now. Because that section is coming in just a few minutes and it's the reason I put this whole thing together. But before the fix, there's one more layer, and it's the one almost nobody talks about. Because even if you catch the name, even if the microphone is on, there's a second failure point that quietly destroys most of the names you think you've learned. And it has to do with what happens in the 60 seconds after you hear it. What almost nobody talks about is the shape of forgetting itself. In the 1880s, a German psychologist named Hermann Ebbinghaus did something nobody had done before. He turned his own memory into a laboratory. He memorized thousands of meaningless syllables and tracked, with brutal precision, how fast he forgot them over time. What he discovered became known as the forgetting curve, and it is one of the most reliably reproduced findings in all of psychology. Here's what it says, and it should stop you cold. The steepest, fastest loss of a new memory happens not over days or weeks. It happens in the first hour. Within 20 minutes of learning something new and meaningless, like a name, you've already lost a large chunk of it. Within an hour, more than half can be gone. The curve drops like a cliff at the start, then flattens out. Which means the fate of a name is decided almost entirely in the first minute after you hear it. Save it in that first minute, and it can last for years. Lose it there, and it's gone before you've finished the conversation. Read that again. The battle for a name is won or lost in the first 60 seconds. Not later, not with effort tomorrow, right then. And this is where the two mechanisms collide into one brutal truth. First, the name barely got encoded because your spotlight was elsewhere. Second, whatever weak trace did form, is now racing down the steepest part of the forgetting curve. 2 failures, stacked. It's a wonder we remember any names at all. But there's a flip side to Ebbinghouse's discovery, and it's the good news hidden inside the bad. He didn't just find that we forget fast. He found the exact tool that stops the forgetting, and it's the foundation of the fix I'm about to give you. Ebbinghaus discovered that if you retrieve a memory, if you actively pull it back up, right at the moment it's about to fade, the forgetting curve resets. And not just resets, it flattens. Each time you successfully recall something at the edge of forgetting, the memory becomes more durable than it was before. The neurons wire together harder. This is called spaced retrieval, and it's the closest thing memory science has to a genuine law. The act of remembering is what builds the memory, not the act of hearing, not the act of repeating passively, the act of pulling it back out from inside your own head. So the question becomes, if your brain has this built-in mechanism, this ability to lock a name in permanently by retrieving it at the right moments, how do you actually use it in a real conversation, in real time, without looking strange? That's the fix. And it takes about 30 seconds. Here's the protocol, 4 steps. Every one of them maps directly onto the science you just learned, and you can start using this in your very next conversation. Step 1. The moment you hear the name, say it back out loud, immediately. Nice to meet you, David. This does 2 things at once. It forces your spotlight off yourself and onto the name, switching the recording microphone on. And it makes you produce the name yourself, which is a form of active retrieval far stronger than passive hearing. This one move alone, done in the first 2 seconds, will roughly double your odds. Say the name in your first reply, always. It should become automatic, like buckling a seatbelt. Step 2. Attach the name to a meaning. Beat the Baker-Baker paradox. Remember, a name is meaningless data with no hooks. So give it hooks. In the 2 or 3 seconds after you hear David, silently connect it to something. Maybe a David you already know. Maybe the biblical David and the giant. Maybe the sound rhymes with something. It doesn't have to be clever. It doesn't have to make sense to anyone but you. You're simply forcing the arbitrary sound to fire together with something meaningful, so a pathway forms. Turn the name Baker into a baker with an apron. Give the empty word a picture. Step 3. Look at their face and link the name to one feature. This is the step that Dr. Gary Small, a psychiatrist who ran the UCLA Longevity Center for years, has taught to patients over 65 as part of his memory training work. Pick one distinctive thing about the person's face, the strong eyebrows, the warm eyes, the sharp jaw. Then deliberately tie the name to it. David, dark eyebrows. You're building the exact face name pathway your hippocampus needs, firing the 2 together on purpose, instead of hoping they connect on their own. 3 to 5 seconds. Nobody can see you doing it. Step 4, and this is the one that defeats the forgetting curve. Use the name again, once, about 30 to 60 seconds later in the conversation. So, David, what brought you here tonight? That single delayed retrieval, timed to the moment the memory is just beginning to slip, resets Ebbinghaus's curve and flattens it. You are doing spaced retrieval live, in real time, exactly as the research prescribes. 1 early use, 1 delayed use. That's the whole engine. If even one of these 4 steps was new to you, take a second and hit the like button. It genuinely tells the algorithm to push this out to more people over 50 who've been quietly scared that forgetting names meant something worse. It doesn't, and they deserve to know that. Let me give you the compressed version so it sticks. Say it back. Give it meaning. Tie it to the face. Use it again a minute later. 4 moves, 30 seconds. Spread naturally across the opening of any conversation. None of it looks unusual. All of it is invisible to the other person. And every single step is doing precise neurological work, switching on attention, building meaning hooks, wiring the face name pathway, and resetting the forgetting curve before it can drop. I'd bet most of you have used someone's name back to them at least once, and noticed you remembered it better that time, but never understood why it worked. Now you do. And here's a small challenge. At your next gathering, try just step 1 and step 4. Nothing else. Say the name when you hear it, and say it again a minute later. Then tell me in the comments whether you still knew it at the end of the night. I think the result will surprise you. Now step back with me for a moment, because this is about something larger than names. We tell ourselves a story as we age. The story is that the mind is a machine that's wearing out, and every forgotten name is another piece falling off. But that's not what the science says. Denise Park's research, Gary Small's clinical work, Ebbinghouse's curve, Hebb's law, they all point to the same quiet truth. Most of what we call losing our memory isn't loss at all. It's a change in how the machine wants to be operated. The aging brain doesn't need to be repaired. It needs to be asked differently. Given a moment, given attention, given a meaning to hold on to. Do that, and it will hand names back to you the way it did at 30. The research is still evolving on exactly how much of age-related forgetting is encoding versus retrieval, and honest scientists will tell you the lines are blurry. But on this one point there is little argument. Attention and active retrieval improve memory at every age tested, from 20 to 90. The tool works no matter how old you are. So the next time you shake a hand and hear a name, don't brace for the blank that used to follow. You know what to do now. Say it back, hang a meaning on it, pin it to a face, and reach for it one more time a minute later. 30 seconds of the right kind of attention, and that name is yours. I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's the one memory trick you wish someone had taught you 10 years ago? Read the other replies too. Some of the best techniques I know came from viewers, not textbooks. And share this with someone who's been whispering that they're just bad with names, because they've been carrying a fear they never needed to carry. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. What I'm working on next is about the one nightly habit that quietly sharpens memory while you sleep, and I've been digging through the research on it for weeks. Here's the thing to carry with you. You never forgot those names. You just never truly heard them.